Well, hi, everybody. This is Brenda Hawes, and I want to welcome you to our presentation today. I think I started and did a little ramble, and now I'm realizing we're just getting you all on board with us. So welcome to the webinar, and my colleague Brenda Allen is assisting in the background. It's the two Brendas with you today, and so if you have any questions, feel free to type them in. We have a couple of polling questions along the way. Sorry for our late start. We were having a little technical difficulty with computers. So it's sort of a chance to see how we manage change and transition here as we're ready to present. Just a couple quick things in terms of housekeeping. There'll be a couple polling questions. The PowerPoint and handouts will be emailed after the presentation if you're interested. Our webinars are archived on our YouTube section go to myrbh.com, and there's a YouTube icon under my benefits, and you can access all of our webinars there as well, or at webinars@reliantbh.com. So today we're going to be talking about managing change and transition. Certainly the one thing that we can all count on in life is change. Some of our learning objectives are really to define the difference between change and transition. Recognizing that when we move through these kinds of things, it's an opportunity to learn and grow. There are two ways that we exercise the brain. One of them is through novel experiences, and the other is through learning new things. So this is an opportunity to exercise your brain while you're at it today. We're going to talk about the difference between change and transition, and also how to build resiliency for health and well-being. So moving on to the next slide, why this particular discussion and why now? Now, as you know, we are living in a time with lots and lots of change. Every day we're reading about something in the newspapers. There's change happening not only in our country, but also in the world that we live in with the advent of technology and the fast pace that life is changing. It's a really important discussion to be having. We're all impacted by it. Our companies, our business, industries impacted, and it's helpful to just kind of have some ideas and some strategies for managing it. Change is, at one time in our lives, it was an episodic thing. It happens now and then. Now it's a constant. And I've been hearing some different things about technology and predictions by 2028 that will be impacted dramatically by artificial intelligence, robotics, nanotechnology, and so we're looking at some big changes ahead too. And then we want to talk about some personal tools that you can implement that'll help you move through transitions that are caused by change. So when we look at change, it's really not what happens to us, but what we do with what happens to us. It's the way we relate to it. It's the way we think about it and the way we respond to it all at the same time. So change happens to us, and transition is the way we psychologically respond to the change that's happening. So moving on to the next slide, which is a funny little cartoon here. I'll kind of read through the cartoon as we go through it. It's Ziggy. So he starts out by looking at the detour sign and says, along our path of life, we get a series of detours, and we all get frustrated and impatient when we feel we have to leave the path we've chosen. But what if the real path of life is really made up of all these detours, and instead of learning the real lessons of life, we miss them because we were too busy being frustrated and impatient? So I think this really speaks to the whole idea of kind of that which we resist persists. When we get into resistance to change rather than flow with it, we can really miss out on the opportunities that are inherent in that process. So just kind of keep that in mind as we're moving ahead. One of the things that can happen when we're dealing with change and transition is we can experience a lot of anxiety. Anxiety is basically future orientation and time thinking. It's imagining things in the future, and that future isn't here yet. And it's like Mark Twain once said, I've solved a lot of problems in my life, most of which I never had. So a lot of times we can have uncertainty coupled with something that feels really important, and then that creates anxiety. Along with that is this whole idea of strain. As we're going through change, as we're dealing with transitions, we can feel the anxiety, but we can also feel the strain. And strain, the definition of that is it's a mismatch between the demands on a person and the person's appraisal of their ability to meet those demands. And sometimes a person can feel threatened, they can feel challenged, or it can actually even feel dangerous. So that's with anxiety, a lot of times it's the thinking that's really the challenge. So we have to take a look at the way we think about things, because that also impacts our emotions, the way we then respond and then relate as well. So what is transition? Moving on to the next slide. Change is a shift, as I was saying, in the external, where transition is the psychological, the internal shift that we make when we're going through it. Oftentimes transitions take a little bit longer. Oftentimes when we're going through a transition, it means loss. It's loss of the familiar, loss of what we've known. It might mean loss of certain relationships. It might mean a loss of our identity, the things that we feel good about when we think about a job that we've done or a relationship that we've had, and then something changes. We're not sure where we're going in the future. We're not sure what that's going to look like. A lot of times when we are in a place of uncertainty during that place of transition, a lot of times the nature of mind is in the absence of knowing, is that we start making things up. We make up a story. We make up an idea about how things are going to go, because it's really, really hard to hang out with not knowing. And that is one of the challenges of transition. And if we can hang out and hang out in present time, which is really kind of where the peace is, it gives the opportunity for us to flow with the new ideas and possibilities that can come to us in that transition place. But it's really important to acknowledge just the whole idea of loss. Loss is often accompanied by change and transition. That's a normal, natural, healthy response to loss. And when we can acknowledge that we're going through it, might be feelings of sadness, it could be feelings of anger, it could be frustration, it could be a gamut of a lot of different emotions that we might be experiencing, and those are all normal, natural reactions, to give ourselves permission to feel them, because emotion is energy in motion. And it's kind of in Eastern medicine, we have a chi, we have energy running through our bodies. When we get into resistance to the change, when we get into resistance to what is happening and to the what is, it can block our flow. It can block the flow of new ideas. It can block the flow of being able to respond in a way that can serve us best and those around us, as well as our coworkers as well. So let's move into kind of some 4 stages of transition. There are 4 different stages that we can be thinking about. One is this idea of disenchantment. And disenchantment causes us to question some of our fundamental beliefs about the world. We think the gods are just, and if I work really hard, I'll be rewarded. And then when we have a change that happens, we feel kind of cheated, or like all the work that we've put into is not being now rewarded. And the world is no longer as we think it's going to be. Disengagement is when we're separated from the familiar, or separated from activities, settings, or roles that have been important to us. We lose the sense of being connected or being in relationship in ways that really matter and are meaningful to us. Also, we have disidentification. And disidentification is sort of like, I'm not sure who I am. I don't think I fit in anymore. A lot of times when we have a certain job, when we're a parent, when we're a spouse, a partner, a coworker, the different roles that we have in our lives, we have identities that are associated with them. And that's how we identify ourselves. I'm a mother, I'm a worker, I manage this, I do that. And sometimes when we go through the transition, we no longer have the same identity. And so that can be a big change, and it can be a loss. Okay, so in the absence of that, who am I now? And then the last one is disorientation. And sometimes when we're going through transition, we can feel a sense of we don't know where we are, we don't know what we're doing. We feel that like, oh my gosh, I'm sort of shipwrecked on an island and I don't really know where I am. It's loss of direction sometimes, and that can lead to some feelings of emptiness. So fast forwarding a few slides, we're going to come to our first polling question. And the polling question number 1 is true or false. Disengagement is one of the 4 normal responses to transition. So is that true or false? All right, so plug your answers in there if you feel like responding. And the answer is true. Disengagement is one of the 4 that we just were talking about. So as I was mentioning, transition involves loss. Like I was saying, loss of our beliefs about the world, loss of the familiar, loss of self-definition, and loss of sense of direction. And as Charles Darwin once said, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent, but the one that's the most responsive. And this is sort of really speaks to our ability to adapt. And the more we're able to stay open, and the more we're able to kind of understand these natural, normal reactions to transition, it helps us be more responsive. So let's talk about some of the natural emotions in transition. As we've been talking about, a normal natural reaction is fear, anxiety, insecurity, and uncertainty. It's that fear of the unknown, that uncertainty. The thing about fear and anxiety is that when we have an anxious thought or an anxious situation, oftentimes what happens is when we're feeling anxiety, having an anxious thought, the body dumps all this adrenaline and cortisol into the system, because the subconscious mind does not know the difference between an anxious thought and the tiger's chasing me. So when we have that, when we activate the fear response, we activate our stress response. It's our survival mechanism that tells us danger, danger, danger is present. And so that's part of why we want to learn to manage some of this transition time, is sort of keep our thoughts in check, because sometimes if we have a lot of that extra adrenaline and cortisol running through our system, if we don't have a way to release it, that can lead to sickness, or it can come out sideways, and that could be anxiety, depression, physical health issues, or even relationship issues. Some other just natural emotions, and I always like to talk about natural emotions because we need to always know that whatever we're feeling is okay. It's a normal, natural response to what we're going through, and anybody going through these kinds of changes and transitions are going to feel it also. The key is to not to judge ourselves, to just allow ourselves to have the emotions, name them, identify them, and that's how we work through them. So other ones might be frustration, might be anger, it might be resentment, might be sadness, passivity, depression, guilt, some of the things I'm mentioning. Feelings of unfairness, betrayal, distrust. How come this company's doing this to me? I can't believe this is happening. I've worked for 30 years and I never thought this change was going to happen. It used to be that people would move into a job, they'd be there forever and there wouldn't be changes, and now there's layoffs, downsizing, shifting in position. Sometimes there's envy. You envy what somebody else has. You want what somebody else has because it looks, that's what you desire. Sometimes we can become really self-absorbed and preoccupied. Other times there might be excitement, relief, hope. Hope is, like, I wonder what this future is going to bring. So all these are normal, natural reactions to these kinds of situations. All right, moving along. Part of something that this is a good little graphic to show us how things work. We move from having an ending, the ending of what was, into the neutral zone, which is this transition phase. This is the place where we're hanging out sometimes for a little longer than we want while we're waiting to find out what's going on. We're anticipating, we're wondering, we're questioning, we're having all these feelings that I was talking about. There's a lot of unknown ahead of us, and then pretty soon you're going to move into the beginning. But we have to go through the neutral zone in the meantime, and that's where the transition happens. There's a man by the name of William Bridges that wrote kind of an ever-famous, always famous book called Transitions, and his work is often referred to, that really kind of highlights some of these ideas. So on the next slide, it kind of shows a little bit of a kind of like a wheel that we go through, where initially there's some denial. I can't believe this is really happening. It's really similar to the grief process. Denial, anger, might be shock, there might be fear, frustration, confusion, some stress. There's oftentimes bargaining. Maybe if I hadn't done this, this wouldn't be happening now. And a lot of that is just kind of a wanting to have some control over what's going on, because oftentimes we don't know what the future is going to bring, and it brings a lot of stress. It's a lot of anxiety associated with, am I going to be able to do this? Is this going to work out? How is this going to be impacting my life? And those are, again, like I say, normal, natural reactions. And the absolute key in moving through this transition time is to not judge yourself or to judge others, because there's a tendency when we're having strong emotions and strong feelings, whether it's ourselves or the people that we're in relationship with, there's a tendency to be in judgment of it. And really, feelings are just feelings. And the more we judge them, the more we resist. And then that gets in the way of being able to work through them. As I was saying, emotion is energy in motion. We allow the energy to move in a new direction when we accept it for what it is. And that's what then begins to lead us then toward the new beginnings, where we can really let our creativity flow. We move more into acceptance. Sometimes there can be impatience in there along the way because we want to hurry up and get there, wherever that there is, or to this place where we feel like we're going to be more settled in, more familiar, where we have more energy, less anxious, and sometimes it then really can bring some enthusiasm along the way. So let's talk next about some ideas for living in the neutral zone. What's really important is to develop short-term goals. And and that really means taking things one step at a time. That means going from A to B, B to C, C to D, and not trying to jump from A to M or A to Z. Because a lot of times we go A to B, and then B kind of helps direct where C is going to go, and then C might direct where D is going to go. So short-term goals, those are just going to be the SMART goals: small, manageable, achievable, realistic, and time limited. So what it also allows us to do when we have some short-term goals is to take some action steps where we can actually feel some sense of control and some ability to influence what's our situation. And it might be just a short-term goal of, I'm going to take a little time out for a breather every day. I'm going to go for a stretch. I'm going to talk to a friend. Could be something really, really simple. The simpler, the better, actually. Hold a long-term vision. And long-term vision also means that you may not necessarily know what the outcome of the situation is, but hold kind of a long-term vision, intention that in time things will work out. Also, it's like looking for the opportunities in the situation. How is this transition? How is this neutral zone? How is this an opportunity for me? How is this an opportunity for me to learn and grow? If I find that I'm getting really anxious as I'm moving through that, maybe that's an indicator for me that I want to pay a little bit more attention to how I manage my stress. How do I manage my anxiety? If I get depressed or discouraged, maybe the fact that I'm seeing that I am is an opportunity to grow and learn and get some ideas about how to manage some of those intense feelings that come along with the depression. Sometimes you're going to take risks, and sometimes you're going to make mistakes. That comes with transitions. It comes with moving forward. We don't always know how things are going to go. Everything isn't laid out. A lot of times when we get into something and we're making a change, or a management team is making a change, they can't know or anticipate what some of the obstacles are going to be. So along the way, mistakes do get made, and that means sometimes we have to revamp, we have to rethink. Another thing that can happen when we're moving through the neutral zone is that we can rediscover things about ourselves that we've forgotten. Maybe we have some creativity that comes forth. Maybe we're a writer and we forgot that we were a writer. Maybe we have some ways of organizing a group. Maybe we're the person that's got the team spirit and the kind of the one in a group that's encouraging others. So it really becomes an opportunity. And as we've been talking about, in the opportunities are the chances to learn new things, to grow. In that, we also can cultivate new relationships, have new connections along the way, which can be really, really helpful as well. And another thing that's important is to take some breaks. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. And sometimes that means distracting yourself from some of the other things that are going on. So when you're moving through this, it's really important to identify what is changing for you. What is specifically changing? What do you notice coming up? These are really important opportunities to become introspective. Sort of like, we all have a wise mind in us. We all absolutely know what's best for us. We are our own best teacher, our own best advisor. Sometimes, like the sun is always there, but sometimes the clouds get in the way of the sun shining. Sometimes the same thing happens for us. Our best thinking, our wise mind isn't always available to us because of some of the strong emotions that we might be having that are getting in the way. So when we can take stock of what's going on, it gives us the opportunity to kind of learn and grow. Okay, so is this a control issue for me? Do I feel like I'm losing control? Is this more of a turf issue? Is it more like somebody else is moving into my turf, or that's the direction I want to go, and somebody else is taking over that role, and that's the role that I wanted, or new people are moving into my or our environment, and this feels like ours. We're not really ready to share it, or they don't know this part of the organization, or we don't know them, or they relate and behave differently than we do. So there's a change in relationships. Maybe that's the thing that seems most significant. It may be for you, back to the meaning and identity that we were talking about a little bit ago. That may feel like the biggest thing that's changing. It may be how you feel about your future, how your future is impacted. It could be the structure, your hours. It could be a commute, anything related to the structure relating to the change of, it could be work or personal. And so whenever I talk about these kinds of things, I'm talking about them not only in terms of your work world, but in your personal world. So it may be that you're relating more to a change and transition in your personal life. For some of you, it may be more in your work life. It's really the same. So take that time to be introspective, to contemplate, because those are some really important ways to kind of get in touch with what's going on for you. Okay, so let's take a look next at what it is that you might be gaining as you're moving through this. You might be gaining some of the same things that you were afraid of losing. It may be that as you move through it, you'll be gaining some control. There might be some new turf, some that's going to be new and different, and you might really enjoy it. There may be some relationships that are going to be really wonderful, some new meaning and identity, some new opportunities in the future, a new structure that might really serve you best, and some of the ways that you can best function and be productive in your environment. All righty, next, let's talk about, okay, how am I going to strengthen my resiliency? So basically, resiliency is, well, hang on, let's talk just one more second on the slide that we're on. I moved ahead one, sorry about that. Real transitions do challenge us to learn more about who we are, to really realign our values and priorities. When I talk about values, what I always like to remind people, whether I'm doing a training or I'm working with a couple or a family or individuals, is to really take a look at what do you value most, and do my actions value what it is that I say I value most. And then we look at our behaviors and we say, okay, does this behavior that I'm engaging in, is this behavior in service to the things that I say I value most? And sometimes we're out of alignment. So we have to come back into alignment to make sure we're walking our talk, to make sure that we know what our values are, and is that where we're putting our energy and attention. So the transitions can also, as I was mentioning earlier, they can really strengthen our relationships. They can show us what we're capable of. Sometimes we don't know all of what we're capable of until we stretch, when we stretch ourselves. And sometimes it's helpful along the way to be grateful. So how are we going to strengthen our resiliency? Again, resiliency, as I was mentioning, it's the ability to bounce back in the face of adversity, in the face of challenge, in the face of new circumstances that maybe I haven't experienced or is new. So as we had talked about before, key, accepting that all the feelings that you have are normal and natural. It can be really helpful to gather information. Gather as much information as you can. Both keep your own counsel, and maybe you're going to gather information from your manager, from your supervisor. You're going to ask clarifying questions. You know, my favorite question is, what do you mean? Can you tell me more about that? No matter what, if you don't know, ask. And there's nothing the matter with asking. It may be that people are going to say, or manager, supervisor, you know, partner, spouse, whoever is going to say, I don't know. And so then you're left with having to hang out with not knowing. But if you don't ask, you're not going to have the chance to find out. So, and sometimes people think, oh, I don't want to ask. I don't know how to articulate it. You know, it is that you have to know how. Sometimes just taking that first step and getting it out there is the key right there. Another thing that can strengthen our resiliency is understanding ourselves, as I was talking earlier about self-inquiry, contemplation, really kind of taking a look at ourselves, looking at our triggers, looking at our responsiveness, looking at our reactivity. You know, and emotional intelligence is a really big thing that's being talked about these days. And emotional intelligence is sort of about recognizing that all people are different. People respond differently. They respond differently in situations. Some people may immediately have some emotional reactivity. Some people may have to go away and think about it and then react later. Other people are not reactive because they're just not emotional. They're more kind of analytical. It's really helpful when we can talk with other people, when we can just have a neutral third-party sounding board, whether it's a friend, a family member, a coworker, a colleague, or the EAP. The beauty of bringing it up with our coworkers and our colleagues is that we find out that maybe they are going through the same thing that we are. Maybe they're having a similar experience, and it helps normalize it for us. And of course, the EAP, I'll talk a little bit more about that at the very end, about how that can be a great resource as well. Along the way, it's really important to make sure that you're doing what revitalizes you. What's going to help you deal with some of the stresses and some of the challenges, and just sometimes what feels like chaos going on. And that might just be something really simple, is just taking some breaths throughout the day. You know, oftentimes people will say, I can't really take time out. I really can't engage in self-care. Well, truly, the absolute best way of managing stress is breathing, taking time out to breathe. Breathing is free. It's available anytime, day or night. You can do it when you're driving in your car, walking down the road, sitting in your desk while you're making a phone call. And it's the absolute best way to bring down the stress response, and kind of help us ground and center. And of course, when you take responsibility for how you're feeling and you realize maybe my thoughts, my belief systems, my mental formations are impacting the way I'm feeling and thinking in this situation and even behaving, gives us the opportunity to then maybe take a look at some things that we want to change. Because the truth of it is we all have these mental formations, these things that we develop right from the get-go, just like we learn to walk and talk, things that are, it's a computer program that's operating in the background and we don't even always know that it's operating. When we do the self-inquiry, we take a look at our buttons when they get pushed. We look at when we get triggered. That's a doorway in to find out what are some of the beliefs that I may be having that no longer serve me. Now it's time to press the delete button. Now, a sense of humor is probably one of my favorite things. The beauty of the sense of humor is that actually when we laugh, we release the happy hormones. And a lot of research is showing that just turning our mouth up into a smile alone releases endorphins that can make us feel better. Along the way, continuing to check our attitude. What are the thoughts and beliefs I'm bringing to this, as we've been talking about? And attitude is mental. It's about thoughts, beliefs, and the way we're responding to the situation. And is there a way to find meaning in, what you're going through? All righty, let's move on to the next thing, which is our polling question. Polling question number 2. Which of the following is true about resiliency? It's the ability to bounce back in the midst of adversity. Its acceptance of feelings is helpful during transitions. Doing what revitalizes you helps with the chaos. All of the above. I'm just going to give a couple minutes in case we want to take a little bit of time for people to respond. Okay. And the answer is all of the above. Moving on to the next one. One of the other things that really can strengthen your resiliency is commit to taking good care of yourself and taking good care of your health. When we're going through transition, when we're going through change, it can really activate the stress response, as I was mentioning a little bit earlier. When the stress response gets activated, that's our survival mechanism. That's the survival mechanism that tells us, oh my gosh, I'm in danger and I need to do something to take care of myself. Now, there are a number of ways that the body can let us know that we're under stress. I think of it as kind of like a Mount St. Helens. You know, here in Oregon, we have Mount St. Helens where this pressure built and built and built, and then after thousands of years, that pressure in the earth built, and pretty soon we had an eruption. There was an explosion. The same thing happens with us as people. If we have a lot of pressure, and oftentimes stress is what contributes to the pressure. Change, transition, stress, those things create pressure. And if we don't have some outlets to manage the pressure, it can take its toll in a number of different ways. So for some people, and everybody's kind of vulnerable more in kind of one way or another. So some people might be more vulnerable physically. So for them, that might come out a little sideways as migraine headaches, tension headaches, irritable bowel, high blood pressure, any assortment of physical health issues that are directly related to the way we're managing our stress. And I'll tell you how that happens in just a minute, because we've talked about anxiety. Anxiety is another way that our stress can come out sideways. As I was mentioning before, when we have a lot of anxiety, the subconscious brain does not know the difference between the tiger's chasing me and this is an anxious thought. So we're dumping all this adrenaline and cortisol into the system. If we have way more adrenaline and cortisol in the system than the system is designed to handle, then all of our immune system bacteria fighters, they get compromised because they then have to be working on all this adrenaline and cortisol that's in the system instead of being available to fight the natural invaders and the bacteria that are coming in. So that's how our physical health can get compromised if we're not managing our stress. So another way is it can show up as emotional issues, anxiety, depression, anger, explosive behavior, and that can be really challenging for people. Also, when we're not managing our stress and we're having difficulty with the change, transition, the stress response, it impacts our relationships. Sometimes we tend to take out our frustration out on the people that we love and care about the most. Why do we do that? Because they're the least likely to leave us. But in fact, they don't like being yelled at and screamed at when we're under stress. Alrighty, so kind of going back to the previous slide, just a couple more things on that one. Being outside, getting exercise, anything outdoors, breathing in fresh air can really help us with managing the change and transition. As I was mentioning earlier, deep breathing. It might just be 3 breaths in, 3 breaths out, 3 breaths in, calming breath. Making sure when we're practicing our breathing, putting our hand on our heart and our hand on our belly and noticing, where do I breathe from? Do I breathe from my chest or do I breathe from my belly? So you could just try that as an exercise kind of in and of itself. If you notice that your breath is coming more from your chest, then you want to try to anchor it down more into your belly, because when you're able to do belly breathing, those are more full and complete breaths, and they actually can activate the parasympathetic system, which is the calming system. That's, our bodies are designed to move to stress, and it's also designed to have a calming, the kind of like the relaxation response is what that is. So also taking care of yourself, it's going to be experiencing that sense of calm in whatever way you can do it. For some people, it might be yoga, dance, meditation, mindfulness. It might be writing things down, maybe writing things down and getting them out of your head. Sometimes people will tend to ruminate and run things over and over and over again. And sometimes when they can journal and write it out and get it out of their head and onto paper, that really helps with establishing a sense of calm. And one of the things that can be helpful is to think about a time in your life when you were taking good care of yourself, when you were committed to your health, and when you felt calmer and more connected. What were you doing then that helped that be so? That's part of that contemplation inquiry that I've been talking about, is tune into yourself and think about when I've been successful in the ways that I would like to be with managing change or with managing some of these strong feelings that can come up. What was I doing that helped that be so? The solution to a problem is not in the problem itself. The solution to a problem is, when things are better, what was I doing that helped that be so? Another thing that people find really helpful is gratitude, whether it's getting up in the morning, whether it's, as you go to bed at night, taking a minute out to just think about, what am I grateful for? And it's all in the field. There's sort of gratitude, and then there's complaint. And we can all find things to complain about, and we sometimes get wired in that direction. So taking that minute out to express gratitude can really be helpful. And sometimes just expressing gratitude to one another, expressing gratitude and appreciation. This thing that you did, I saw and appreciated, and letting somebody know that with a little written note or just a face-to-face communication. Not only is it something that's going to benefit you, but it's certainly going to benefit the other person. And one of the things that I find is that the more we look for things to be grateful for, the more we will begin to notice them, and the more they'll show up, because we're wired to be looking in that direction. I worked one summer at a ranch camp for exceptional children, the end of my freshman year in college, and the director was a psychologist in Eugene who believed in ignoring all negative behavior and only reinforcing positive behavior. And these were children with serious mental health issues. And I was a changed person by the end of that summer, after I was spending the summer just focusing on positive behaviors, because I found that when I looked for them, I could see them. And that just grew and expanded the more I did it. So back to the last bullet here is that commitment to self-connection, tuning into yourself. The body doesn't lie. So if it's oftentimes the first thing that will let us know that there's something going in is that our body will tell us, whether you feel clenched fists, whether you feel tightness in your shoulders, where you feel kind of an ache in your head, something in your lower back. It shows up for people differently in different ways, but oftentimes the body's the first thing that's going to let you know, okay, I'm experiencing some tightness, I'm experiencing some tension, some anxiety, some discomfort. And if we tune into it and take that moment to just tune in and pay attention, that sometimes can be a really important part of creating a shift. It's when we ignore it and say, oh, not now, later. Oh, someday never comes. So doing what's in our control means that we take some kind of an action step to take care of ourselves, because we can think about it until we're blue in the head. But when we take an action step, that's what creates momentum for change and continuing change, and to deal with whatever it is that's going on and is going to be in front of us requires taking an action step. And sometimes it can just be one small little action step that creates the momentum for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. So those are some keys. So on the next slide, we're going to talk just for a brief minute about Is it stress or is it depression or anxiety? Whatever it is that's going on, it's okay. It's okay to have whatever feelings you have. And sometimes you might sort of feel this question of, am I pulling out of it? What's the matter with me? What's going on? What will help me feel better? Just recognize that those are the questions that then sometimes become the motivator for us to either seek support from a colleague, a coworker, a family, friend, a trusted counselor, the EAP. If you have any kind of question about, is this stress or is it depression or anxiety, reach out. Reach out to the EAP. We're a really good resource for that to help you kind of identify. I've talked a little bit about what anxiety is. Anxiety is future orientation and time thinking. It's worrying about something in the future and that future isn't here yet. Depression is more kind of where we turn our feelings inward on ourselves. Instead of expressing our truth, articulating our truth, speaking up, we hold it in and we hold it in and we hold it in and hold it in, and pretty soon it starts to take a toll on us. So it just kind of speaks to the importance of really, speaking your truth, speaking up. And if not able to do it, then maybe it's going to be to somebody at the EAP or a trusted counselor. In the next slide, we're going to talk about the support, supporting others. And this is a key when we're talking about resiliency, when we're talking about change and transition, is never underestimate the power and your ability to help someone else when somebody's having a hard time. The thing that people most need and want when they're having a rough time is, one, to know that someone's listening, someone cares, and that there are resources out there that are going to be able to help. And so just you're tuning in. As you're moving through change, as you're moving through transition, you're going to see your colleagues, your coworkers, your family members. You're going to see that some of their behaviors have changed. Something is different. Maybe they're usually really gregarious and laughing, and all of a sudden they seem more withdrawn and moody. That's letting you know something's going on for that person. And what's really important is when you see some of these things going on, don't take it personally, because oftentimes people have things going on, and actually most of the time, if not all the time, it's because it doesn't have anything to do with you. It has to do with what's going on with that particular individual. So try to be objective. Don't take it personally, be objective, and that's going to allow you to be able to reach out rather than kind of hold back, because you're, not being as cautious when you're personalizing it. We get cautious. Understand that others like you are transitioning as well, and everybody's situation may look a little different. It's just like in the grieving process. One person, when they lose a loved one, may immediately be angry and feel cheated and ripped off, that they've been taken away too soon or too quickly and they're losing. And other people, they're immediately moving into their sadness and their grief. We all respond differently. There is no one right way, no wrong way. They're just different. And it's about respecting and understanding differences, and also asking, what do you mean by that? Listen and let people, share, and sometimes asking questions, paraphrasing, letting people know that you heard. Also sharing your own story. Oftentimes your testimonial about your own experience of what helped you get through something, or when you were having a rough time, what helped you get through it, is one of the things that really helps break some of the stigma that's associated with maybe even getting mental health counseling or accessing an EAP. Sometimes it's going to be helpful to share your story. Sometimes it might be helpful to offer some advice or some suggestions. Gauge, what does this person need? Maybe even ask, hey, I've got some ideas. I've got some advice. What would feel most helpful for you? Would you want me just to listen? Do you want me to give you feedback? When in doubt, ask. What do you most need and want right now? How could I help right now? What would be and feel most helpful for you? And then another one is to avoid gossip, avoid toxic relationships, and avoid conversations where, there's sort of the ain't it awful and the complaining. And, it's one thing to share our concerns and to kind of get them out there, but when we have to feed on them, some people get their energy from kind of feeding into negativity, talking about other people, judging or criticizing, and so that's kind of a comfort level for them. But in the long run, a lot of times the reasons that people gossip is because in the gossiping process, it helps them feel more powerful when they otherwise don't feel very powerful. All right, next is what we call an energy grid. And I think of this as, it's also sometimes referred to as locus of control. Where is your locus of control? Do you feel like you are a person who has the ability to take control in your life and you can make things happen, and through your effort and through your attitude that you can be effective in creating and initiating change? Or do you feel like a victim, that life happens to you and you don't have any ability to be able to influence that? So if you look at this grid, well, like I said, I call it, it's a locus of control grid, but there's the box, you can see control and important. So anything that you kind of see as within my control and it's important, maybe those are going to be the things that you're going to attend to first. So a way to think about using this grid would be maybe to think about just some of the things that are stressing you related to maybe a current change that you're going through or a transition situation. So kind of write down what some of your concerns are. Okay, then take each one of those concerns that you've listed and then fill them in on this box. So if it's something on your list that says, I'm in control of it and it's important, put it in there. Those are the things you're going to attend to first. If you have no control over it, but it's important, then you're going to probably let that one go because it's not within your power to influence. If it's in your control but not important, then it's going to be a lower priority. If it's not important and you have no control, that's something you're going to eliminate first. So this grid it's a way to sort of prioritize. It's a way to think through, kind of what your action steps are going to be and where you want to focus your attention first. And just think about it as one thing at a time, one small step, because that's what creates momentum. In that action step, momentum gets created, and that's where the change agent is. Okay, a few things about roadblocks. I know we've only got about 5 or 7 minutes left, so I'm going to kind of pull some things together here. So there are some roadblocks that can come along the way, and it's not about whether we have them or not, we're going to have them. So anticipating that we're going to have them can be really important, okay? Sometimes when we know we're going to have them, we can anticipate, then we're not going to be as stressed when it happens. So sometimes there can be lots of rumors, speculation, there can be blame. Don't get stuck in that. Check things out. Check it out, check it out, check it out. A lot of times there's misinformation in a workplace floating around when things are, when the change is happening. It's important along the way to acknowledge the losses, what you're letting go of. We let go of the old to make room for the new, but sometimes it's important to say goodbye. Say goodbye to the things that we treasure, that were valuable to us, that really helped us feel safe and secure and connected, and all the things that were really important about those. Acknowledge them. And when we acknowledge them, we give them voice. We bring them into the light. And when we can bring it into the light, that has the chance to be able to move. If we don't acknowledge them, we hold them in, and then they can come out sideways, as I was talking about earlier. Going it alone and trying to do it on our own. The truth about it is none of us is an island. We need each other. And it's important to find someone or some ones that you can connect with and get some help along the ways. So going it alone, or it could be some unhelpful ways. Some people will tend to misuse drugs, alcohol. It could be any one of the addictions, drugs, alcohol, shopping, overeating, gambling. Sometimes those can be things that get in the way for us. Make sure that you laugh along the way and celebrate your successes, and rather than minimizing them. All right, the last thing is laughter. I think laughter, personally, is life's best medicine. And it's free. It's always available to us. It lowers our blood sugar. It can create openings to receiving and being open to new information. It can boost our serotonin levels. It's a great way to establish rapport with shared insight, sometimes all you have to do is laugh with somebody else, and you both know that you just get it. You're connected. You understand. It's a great tool and mechanism for helping us cope with life's many challenges. It relaxes us. It helps us shift our perspectives, and oftentimes laughter is a great way to help navigate conflict, because when we can argue together, we can fight together, and then laugh together, it can be a bridge. It can be a bridge through conflict to realize, okay, so I know we were having this rough go of it together, but this laughing it off and seeing the other side to it and seeing another perspective can be really helpful. Because the truth of it is that conflict really, when we learn how to navigate it and get through it instead of resist it or be afraid of it, can help us grow in our relationships with the people that we're in conflict with us, because if we can get through it, it helps build trust. All righty, so let's just talk about the EAP as a resource. So many or most of you that are on the call today have got the RBH, Behavioral Health EAP, as a resource that's available to you. We have a host of different services. We're 24/7, 365. Our phone number's there. There's our website. There's a lot of resources on our website that I would really encourage you to check out. If you just have some questions, want more information about the presentation, or if it spurns you to thinking about something that you'd want to do a manager or a supervisor consultation, that's resources available for people to call in and talk with one of our clinical managers. We're here to support you. We're here to be a resource. We all respond differently. And the thing to keep in mind is that the more you're going through in your life, the number of stressors that you may have going on will impact the way you deal with the stress, the change, and the transition. So for someone who doesn't have a lot of other stressors going on, maybe a change at work, they're not going to be as affected by it. But if somebody has a change at work that's accompanied by, a recent death, a recent loss, a financial situation, a health issue, then sometimes when we have multiple stressors, it's going to make us more vulnerable and more emotionally reactive as we're going through some of these big changes. So I know we're coming to the end of our time together. Was there any kind of a question that anybody had? Or I know it's about 12:59, but certainly if there's any kind of a question, type it in, and while I'm waiting to see if anything comes up on my screen, I just want to thank you for taking the time out to be with us today. And maybe as sort of a parting thought, be thinking about, is there something that I learned today, just one thing that I want to practice, that I want to try, that I want to commit to in the days ahead, as an opportunity to take forward with you some of the learnings that you may have had today. So thanks for taking the time to be with us. I wish you all the very best in your next steps forward. Take care. Bye.